Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Nostalgia Bubble podcast, the show where two lifelong best friends celebrate the movies that they love. I'm one of your hosts, Shuggy, an amateur film reviewer and nerd.
And I am Nye, retired actor and best friend.
Best friend indeed. Your pick this week?
Yeah, this week is my pick, and I picked Monsters, Inc., a childhood favourite.
It wasn't one I expected you to go with.
Really? Well, I'm sure there'll
Yeah.
be more. There'll definitely be more of these sorts of this kind of genre for sure. But yeah, I don't know why I chose this one for this week in particular. I think I was probably just feeling it. And watching it back was so cool. Just remembering the little things that I'd completely forgotten about. And yeah, I mean, I know you like this film as well.
Yeah, so weirdly for me, I think this is like a mid-tier Pixar film. And that is in no way like a slight on this film. That's just a statement on how good Pixar's output has been. Because this is so good.
I love this film. And yeah, plenty of happy memories. I've got to say, from the beginning, Boo has to be the cutest Pixar Disney character ever.
WALL-E exists, man. WALL-E is there, right there.
Yeah, and possibly Stitch, but...
Well, that's Disney.
Yeah, but I would argue Boo kind of tops it. It was actually made even cuter. I was researching this when I was watching it, and it actually is made cuter by the fact that the actor, the little girl that plays Boo, they couldn't get her to sit still in the studio, so all the noises that you hear Boo making are the noises that they recorded just following her around the studio.
I will say the actor, Mary Gibbs, is also Boo's actual name in the film. And it is the daughter of one of the film's story artists.
Yes. And I believe the niece of the writer?
Possibly. But yeah, there's a lot of actually the smaller characters in the film were played by people who worked on the film. Like the two guys who like clean up, and they almost sound like the squeaky voiced teen from The Simpsons a bit.
Yeah.
They're one of the like screenwriters.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh cool.
I think there's quite a lot of that goes on in like these early Pixar films particularly.
Yeah. Do you think that's because of budget?
I think they were just a small studio at that time. Like, they were a much smaller part of Disney. I'm going to get into a bit of pre-production. And the story of Monsters, Inc. is very much tied to the story of Pixar in general. And are you aware of this kind of famous Pixar lunch?
I am not.
So, when they were making Toy Story, which was came out in 95, so the year before, 1994, during the production of it, there was a big lunch for the people involved. And that included John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, who directed Finding Nemo, someone called Joe Ranft, and the director of this film, Pete Docter. And this brainstorming session, they kind of conceived a bunch of different films that would end up, or ideas that would end up becoming Bug's Life, Finding Nemo, WALL-E, and Monsters, Inc. And so this lunch is like film legendary now. Like, it's legendary in sort of film lore.
That's really cool. That all of these people can just sort of conceive these ideas in just off the bat.
Yeah.
Have you seen? I only just recently watched Frozen 2, and on Disney Plus there's a docu-series on the making behind it.
I haven't seen that.
It's fantastic, and it's amazing to see how these people can just produce these ideas and troubleshoot with these incredible ideas that end up becoming, monumental in film.
Yeah.
And it's just, for them, it's almost just kind of problem solving.
Yeah, and it's amazing like how many of like the films that kind of define Toy Story came out of this one lunch.
Yeah.
So whilst all the others, they started working on Bug's Life and Toy Story 2, Doctor, he began working on Monsters, Inc. And so eventually he had a pitch meeting, and he sought advice from a long-time Disney animator, like OG Disney animator, a guy who worked on them since Snow White, and like is the guy who animated the Evil Queen, called Joe Grant. He suggested the name Monsters Inc. actually, so that came from him. And when I tell you the original storyline that Pete Docter came up with for Monsters Inc., it won't sound anything like what we've got. So his original idea was an adult who kind of his childhood monsters came back, and each one represented like a fear that he had to conquer.
Okay, I can't see where this is going.
Well, that's like the original idea he had for the story.
Right.
And to me, that sounds like a way more modern kind of Pixar film. Something like Inside Out or Coco or Soul, which are about these kind of higher ideas. Inside Out's obviously about emotions, Coco about death, and Soul about kind of the nature of what life, the purpose of life is. So this kind of Pete Docter idea feels like it's way more reminiscent of those modern ideas, where it's like, tackling this kind of intangible, feeling, how to conquer fear. And it wasn't like what anyone was doing in animation at that point, which is probably why it got changed.
Why do you think that those themes that run through the films have kind of changed over time? What is it do you think that has kind of almost sort of realigned the focus of these films?
I don't know. I almost feel like maybe Pixar think they can make these... I almost call those like more adult themes. Like kids aren't necessarily going to be invested in, a film about why being sad is okay and good and not a bad trait. And people were probably scared to make that happen until they started doing it and they started making it work, and that's let people really just double down on it. Like Pixar have doubled down on that with that kind of trilogy of Inside Out, Coco and Soul. And I just think maybe they're a bit apprehensive about doing it at the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the conversation, I guess, around mental health and stuff is a lot more prominent and prevalent now, isn't it? So
also the case,
I can see why there's potentially more of a demand to see that kind of reflected in the mainstream. Yeah.
So eventually he decided to scrap this idea, and he decided to make it a buddy story between a monster and a child. His initial kind of idea for Sully was that he was an up-and-comer, but the kind of a big moment that helped them really clarify the character and the direction the story was going, when they hit on the idea of him being like the star. And when they got John Goodman on to play it, he almost like interpreted the character as like this NFL veteran,
Yeah, he definitely does kind of carry that weight through the film. And I love John Goodman, so for me, I think he owned the part. I think that now if Sully were to be voiced by anyone else, it wouldn't necessarily have that same momentum.
Yeah, it's really weird. So originally they wanted, or they considered Bill Murray, and he was apparently interested in it, and he did a screen test, but they just couldn't get in contact with him. So Pete Docter just assumed that was a no.
I wonder if he just kind of saw the film come out and remembered that he'd been in for it or something.
Well, I mean, you talk about someone like that. Billy Crystal, who voiced Mike, he initially turned down the role of Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story. So as soon as Pixar came and offered him this role, he was like, yeah, I want to do that.
Really?
Because he really regretted turning down Buzz Lightyear.
I mean, I'm not actually familiar with the kind of vocal qualities of Bill Crystal on a sort of day-to-day basis, but I cannot imagine the voice of Mike Wazowski being the voice of Buzz Lightyear.
It would be different for sure. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I'm a big fan of Billy Crystal, obviously. When Harry Met Sally, he's got the role in The Princess Bride as well. Guy hosted the Oscars for years. He's a proper comedy legend. And I think that really works with Mike. Like, when you get at the end and he's trying to do the stand-up.
I mean, it shows his versatility although I mean he's got the comedy throughout, really. But
Yeah.
I love this film. I just find it highly entertaining. I still find it funny. I still think that. I mean, I love the detail on the end of, you know, how Disney and Pixar like to do their kind of bloopers, or Pixar particularly likes to do their sort of post-film bloopers.
Yeah, I was saying exactly this to someone on Twitter the other day, a mate of mine, about how I miss when Pixar animated fake bloopers into their films, you know, put them in the post-credits.
So good.
Yeah, I wish they still did it. I can't remember how it came up, but yeah, it came up recently. And I just got this wave of nostalgia, and I was like, I miss it. Oh no, you know what it is? It's Coming to America, the sequel to Coming to America, has some bloopers at the end. And I was talking like, the best bloopers were always the Pixar bloopers.
Oh, absolutely.
Alright, let's get into the film. I kind of actually, I want to mention the opening titles, which are, you know, bright, cartoony, this like kind of jazz, upbeat, Randy Newman score. And I think that's important because I think it helps set particularly like younger kids at ease, because that first sequence could be a little bit scary if you're very young watching this.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, what was weird was that at first I was watching this going, this opening sequence could actually be quite scary. Like, if you're sitting in a dark cinema, you're, I don't know, 3-4 years old, like, the notion of being in bed and there, this, like, these eyes open up under the bed and, you know, like, plays on traditional kind of children's fears. And then as I kind of watched on, it was quite the scary thing. Like, now that I've watched many horror films, the thing that I'd probably find the creepiest out of all of it was this little girl that just shows up behind you when you're looking in one direction and you're trying to find where the sound came from, and you turn around and there's this little squeaky girl, and then she runs off and you're like, yeah, I thought that was creepier than, but maybe that's just me as a seasoned horror watcher. That but yeah, this opening sequence, I mean, if you're a kid watching this film, could be, and who better than Randy Newman, right, to put you at ease?
Yeah, exactly. I kind of want to address, so the whole premise of the film is that the monsters actually have these doors into human world which operate through closets. That feels really American. Like, how many people do you know who have closets? Like, full closets?
Yeah, I mean, that for a start. It feels quite old-fashioned. I mean,
yeah.
I guess,
like, growing up for me, it was always the monster under the bed rather than the monster in the closet.
Yeah. Well, I think the monster under the bed thing is definitely universal, and I think that's why they start with you seeing a monster under the bed. I think it kind of sets the tone. It doesn't matter where you're from, what you're familiar with. I think everybody kind of understands that, or is aware of that kind of that story. But yeah, Monster in the Closet, I mean, it does feel American, but, you know, there's horror films that still use kind of wardrobes and closets as convention.
See, a wardrobe, we've got wardrobes, but I've never had a closet in any house. You know, although uni kind of houses, my friends' houses, I've never known to have a full closet.
Yeah.
So it feels very American to me, and I wonder how they coped, you know, in other countries, because we know they go to other countries because they trying to scare a kid in the pool at one point.
Oh right, so you wonder how they kind of came about, and well, Randall ends up in a trailer, so I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely don't have a closet. Actually, you're right. And then obviously we go into slapstick as the guy fails completely. And then I think kind of a lot of the opening sequence is designed to introduce us to the premise of the world. There's actually quite a lot of exposition from Waternoose, which works quite well because it's almost delivered in the form of a warning to this guy who's failing at training.
Yeah, they're not subtle with it.
No, but I think it's well done in a film for kids.
Yeah, does the job.
And then we meet Sully and Mike, who is this the best Pixar duo, or like what are the other great Pixar duos? So you got Woody and Buzz, Marlin and Dory, Carl and Russell. You've got Joy and Sadness. I think they do a lot of duos.
I think Inside Out is a hard one. That's a difficult one to compare because it's actually about the different dimensions of a single person.
Yeah.
So
what I'm asking is, what I think I'm really asking is, where do you compare this to Woody and Buzz?
So if bringing it down to Woody and Buzz,
I mean, they're both such iconic duos.
Oh, I'm probably gonna have to say Woody and Buzz, just because they prevailed through 4 films. And
the fourth one, Buzz gets sidelined quite a bit.
Yeah, but I mean, they've had 4 very strong films.
Yeah.
Where and they've survived them, and I would argue they've also probably had a bit of a wider impact on kids' entertainment.
Fair enough. I love this friendship. I just love this friendship.
Yeah. I would argue the relationship itself is more entertaining.
Yeah. I'm talking about the relationship, not just the two characters standalone.
Yeah, I think the relationship itself is... I probably enjoy that relationship more than Woody and Buzz.
Yeah. I mean, Mike's relentless optimism is so infectious. Like, when obviously there's both the commercial and the magazine cover, where his face is covered by a sticker and a barcode, and he's just excited to appear on TV or on a magazine cover. And the person he's with, Sully the first time and Celia the second time, are like, they're there ready to comfort him, and he's so excited.
Yeah, he kind of brings this sort of irony to being this childlike figure on that side of the door, you know. Yeah, he kind of represents that sort of fun, childlike uncle figure that keeps you entertained. He's the one that sort of ends up taking all the slapstick and doing all the kind of tricks to make Boo laugh and stuff, and you've got like Sully, who's the caring one, and the sort of more of the father figure.
Yeah, definitely a paternal figure. I like the uncle comparison actually for Mike. That works really well, and I like the slapstick reference because obviously when he comes to he gets to make people laugh at the end, and he's there trying to like do stand-up material, and the kid's just looking at him confused until he does something slapstick.
Yeah.
I remember, like, I can't remember if when as a kid I realised that the laughter was so important, because they kind of really telegraph it early on. Like, so I think any adult watching it will kind of see that final scene coming where they swap to laughter over screams.
Yeah. I didn't clock it until I watched it yesterday, actually, when she's obviously in the building and she overpowers the electricity circuit. She blows it because it's just so powerful. This was the first time watching this film that I kind of caught on to that.
Yeah, and that's early on. But even before that, I do enjoy throwing back to last season. Mike and Celia's date is at Harryhausen's, obviously named for Ray Harryhausen, the man behind Jason and the Argonauts. That's one, because I don't know the last time I watched Monsters Inc., so I don't know if I was like on it last time I saw it. I don't know if I knew immediately. Oh, obviously that's Ray Harryhausen, like legendary pioneer of stop motion monsters. Yeah,
nice little detail. That's something that Disney and Pixar have always been very good at is just kind of including little nods to different influences or even different products of their own.
I mean, yeah, Boo has a Jessie toy.
And Finding Nemo.
Yeah, that's the
Which-
subtler one. Like the Jessie's
Yeah.
like on the floor, can't
And
get away
Finding
from
Nemo
it.
came out after, right?
Yes, but they were
Yeah.
obviously being worked on. Like
Of course,
I think-
yeah. But I quite enjoyed the fact that that Nemo was kind of included in that film.
Yeah. So the scaring process, obviously well pursued, but this is where we get to kind of see it all working. The importance of like Mike's job and the general assistants. They kind of actually do a lot of the work, it seems.
Yeah.
And the scarers just have to be scary. And we get to see the entrance of all the scarers is, like, for me, very reminiscent of like The Right Stuff. You know, these kind of very heroic, because in that it's like astronauts kind of coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it kind of immediately sets up the tone of like Sully's position
Yeah.
and like you can see the dynamic already between him and Randall happening on that walk out.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, like you mentioned. Obviously, it builds this kind of rivalry between Sully and Randall, and obviously, you know, Sully's saying "May the best scarer win," and Randall's like, "I intend to," and so it's setting you up to think, you know, it's all about the competition between the two, and that's what Randall's motive is. So when it's revealed that it's not that, that's actually a big twist that you don't necessarily see coming. That he's just completely trying to revolutionise everything in a quite horrific way, given the outcome of the Scream Sucker, or whatever the device is called. Because it set you up to think one thing, but it actually gives you something completely different. Also in this whole sequence, we get introduced to the CDA, because poor George Sanderson, who is possibly the most unlucky character in any movie ever, gets a sock on him, which is a 2319. Which everyone remembers 2319, man.
But what a nice little conclusion that theme has, where he just kind of, obviously his assistant goes to scream and sound the alarm again, and he just shoves the sock in his mouth and pushes him into the door and shuts it and walks off.
Yeah. But I mean, he has a rough time of it, because obviously he gets shaved down in his decontamination here. When Sully is stuffing away all
in the locker.
Yeah, he stuffs them. The open locker happens to be George's, and he's a nice easy scare in the pool for him when on his return, and Sully comes barging out the door, smashing him, getting him with more kid stuff. He doesn't have a good time of it. I'm a big fan of George, like just one of those small one-off characters. He doesn't have a lot to do, but he makes a pretty iconic impact. Anyway, so Mike hasn't done his paperwork. Intimidated by Roz, he's like, I don't want to cancel my date. We've got this, reservation at Harryhausen's. And Sully, covers for him, says he'll do the paperwork. And when he goes to file it, he sees a door. We go through,
Yes.
and Boo is some kind of wizard, man. Like, she has some magic powers for her ability to just teleport around.
This is what I mean. It's creepy. Like, you put it into the context of a horror film, and you've got a little girl that you don't know running around, and then you turn around, she's not there, and she's behind you.
Yeah,
Like, it's a full blown horror scene.
you're right. She's no longer the cutest. She's the scariest Pixar character.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like she's redeemed pretty quickly, but like, it could be pretty terrifying.
And we know, like, come the end of the film, she's handy with a weapon. Like, she gives Randall a beating with that baseball bat.
Yeah, for sure. She's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Although not in the way that Waternoose and Monster Society have led us to believe. Although I do love when Sully crashes the date with her, and the news reports after, where the observers are all just talking about these random special powers she's got.
It is a brilliant depiction of how things just get sensationalized on such a huge scale, and also them being able to get gags in as well. I love the bystander that corroborates somebody's story and says, I saw the whole thing, and they've got like 1,000 eyes or something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think they're really good with that a lot during the film. Kind of good visual gags based on the monsters. There's the janitor who obviously, as soon as he finishes cleaning, leaves a trail of slime behind him as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think just kind of being able to, I mean, I guess being in this world where you can kind of create literally anything, you've just got it at your fingertips, and you have so much scope to come up with that sort of physical humour, but equally, I guess there's so much scope to miss it. But I definitely think they made the most of it.
Yeah, I mean, even on like the walk they have to work in the start, they get like 3 or 4 good gags in there based on the monsters.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is where we have the whole scene where Mike inadvertently makes Boo laugh and the power gets blown out. But it's also one of the most important scenes for kind of developing the relationship between Sully and Boo, where he puts her to bed, and he kind of this is where he starts to realise she's not dangerous. She's just a child. She does cute drawings. She's scared of her Randall in the closet. And so Sully comes up, great idea, we'll disguise her as a monster, which I think there's an implication that they make that costume out of like the chair, in which case that's some pretty neat costume work for a one night. Possibly.
I didn't notice that, but I'm sure that's definitely something that Pixar would have added in.
No, because he gets the idea as it kind of zooms in on the material of the chair.
Right, okay. And then so he's...
Which, that's...
handy.
These guys should do like cosplay conventions. Like, they'd smash it.
Especially if it's to a standard to trick other monsters into believing that she is a monster.
Although, actually, the eye work definitely needs improvement.
Yeah, for sure.
As one does get lost in the trash.
Yeah, it does.
Which leads Sully to believe that she dies.
Yeah, that scene made me laugh. When that kind of repetition of him standing up and then passing out and standing up and passing out. And I mean, that machine is pretty savage. It's like got a compressor and then a slight, like some sort of guillotine, and then a crusher and like Do you think this is why they're having so many energy problems in Monster City, whatever it's called? Just expending
it's because
it on
they're investing all the money on the trash disposal.
Yeah. The costume is... They somehow made it really cute. I think it's like the bouncing of the hood and like the flippers and it did kind of look a bit like, one of those sort of overall like jackets that you sometimes see babies in where they can't move properly. Yeah. Yeah,
100%. Which is obviously a very cute look. Also, they pass her off as Sully's cousin's sister's daughter, which of course would just be his other cousin's daughter. I love just how bad their lies are. Like, they are horrible liars.
Yeah, I mean, they come up with a whole musical.
I mean, put that thing back where it came from. Also, help me. So help me.
Yeah, and I like that there's kind of, that's an ongoing thing for like at least the next sort of 15-20 minutes, and there's just like coming up with different random lines that don't bear any relevance to each other, but apparently they're part of the same musical. Yeah,
it's a terrible lie, but it's one of the great lies because it gave us the absolute bop that is Put That Thing Back Where I Came From also helped me.
Absolute classic. I actually think it should have been the theme tune for the film and the rolling credits.
Yeah, I agree.
Put Randy Newman out of a job.
I do enjoy. I do appreciate the fact that kind of these relationship moments with Mike and Celia always play some kind of importance to progressing the plot. Like, they didn't put it in there just to have it in there. The fact that, you know, they're going on the date at the start is why Sully has to go back and do the paperwork and discovers the door. And at this point where Celia comes up and confronts him is how Randall kind of realises that Mike was at the restaurant, and he realises that Mike's involved.
Yeah. I think it's kind of... I mean, actually, if you look at the characters, it's very male dominant, and you have 3 female characters, all of whom turn out to be pretty pivotal to kind of plot progression and the direction in which the story goes. I mean, obviously you've got Boo, who is kind of the focal point of the whole film, and then you have Celia, and you make a really good point that actually Celia almost kind of earmarks where those change in directions happen.
Yeah, she's not there just to be a girlfriend to Mike. She is there because she has importance to the story.
Without her, the movement of the plot is sort of stagnated.
And, you know, she definitely, you know, stands up later on to Randall when Mike does explain what has happened. She's the one with the quick thinking and ingenuity to, fake an announcement that he's broken the scare record, which gets everyone to mob him so they can get away a bit quicker.
Yeah, for sure. So, and like, she does come across initially as somebody who she's not particularly intelligent.
They kind of introduce they're like the unbearable couple, and you get the feeling that she comes across a bit dim-witted, but actually she is sharp and she is smart. She's just they're just an unbearable couple. Like, you'd hate to have to third wheel a date of those two.
I think all the female characters have those moments though, you know, like you see Boo is this kind of character who she's cute and she's sort of innocent, and then as you mentioned, she becomes fierce and she picks up a baseball bat and she's unstoppable. You get Celia, who kind of has her moment where she holds up Randall and she kind of uses her initiative to sort of help Mike and Sully. And then of course you've got Roz, who is the orchestrator of... She's
the number one agent of the CDA who's been undercover for 2.5 years.
Yeah. So all of the female characters have these kind of arcs that end up becoming pretty pivotal to the story.
I argue maybe Roz and Celia's aren't necessarily arcs. It's just you kind of get reveals about who they are later on. Whereas I think Boo's very much is an arc. She is terrified of Randall for the film, and she needs to find the courage to face him, and she does that when Sully/Kitty is in danger.
Yeah, okay, so maybe not arcs, but maybe...
Well, I'd say for Boo it's an arc.
Their place in the story is sort of... It proves to be incredibly pivotal. Yeah,
but I'd say for Boo it's an arc.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so then Sully and Boo to kind of discover the evil plan after Mike gets himself accidentally kidnapped. And Sully has this great idea: let's go to Waternoose with the information. Waternoose forces him into a scare demonstration, and he, does his one big scary move, which is scream loudly.
Yeah.
And this is one of the most heartbreaking moments of the film, where he terrifies Boo, and she runs away.
Oh,
he's broken by this. Well, I think the more interesting aspect is not obviously Boo's terrified, but I think the more interesting aspect is how much it hurts Sully when he scares her, and that she runs away from him, and he's visibly broken to the point. Obviously, then Waternoose kind of reveals he's in on the plan with Randall and banishes Sully and Mike. It's Mike's, furious at Sully, trying to argue with him, and Sully's just broken. He's devastated by how he's made Boo feel.
And I think this is kind of Sully's big turning point, because obviously, I guess not only is this about his relationship with Boo, but this is also about, he's top dog at work, and this is him kind of reevaluating, I guess, everything that he's ever done. These are real kids, and he sees that kind of value in these children, and realizes that that's what he's been doing for his whole life, I guess. So it's not just necessarily about his relationship with Boo, but it's also kind of about how he perceives himself.
Yeah, that's a great point. It kind of makes him reevaluate his entire life's work. That this is traumatizing, not just Boo, but what they're doing is traumatizing kids everywhere.
And I think that kind of ties in nicely with obviously they're kind of learning that the power of laughter is 10 times greater than the power of a kid's scream. But I think that kind of that's only complemented by the fact that Sully has this change of heart as well. I don't think one would necessarily work as well without the other.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then we get to them stuck in banishment. They're trapped in a, frozen wasteland. Apparently it's Nepal, so probably up in the Alps somewhere. And they encounter the abominable snowman.
Doesn't he say welcome to the Himalayas?
Oh, does he? Yeah. Okay, Himalayas, that's the one. I don't know my mountain ranges. Let's just...
Me neither. That's also possibly a stab.
My geography's improving.
This is a film podcast.
My geography is improving because I've been playing quite a lot of GeoGuessr, but you don't need to know the names of mountain ranges to do that. You're right, it's the Himalayas.
Yeah, and this is, I remember after this film came out, there was a big, there were people kind of going, snow cone?
Snow cone was a big thing. Thing.
And like, it is. It really is testament to how Disney and Pixar managed to kind of create these characters that they're like a drop in the ocean in the film.
Yeah.
But they're so good at coming up with these little hooks and these little catchphrases, and like you see them, they do it in Nemo with the mine, like with the
fish are friends, not food.
Seagulls, and like these kind of relatively minor characters that pop up, and they don't necessarily do the abominable snowman, other than kind of letting Sully know that there is a village down the hill, which is obviously quite important. He does literally nothing.
Yeah,
the rest of his time is getting out of the way.
I think that has been one of Pixar's great strengths, and to a degree, like just normal Disney as well, is making these smaller characters, with 5 or less minutes of screen time, so memorable, and that they become favourites. Like as we mentioned, a couple from Finding Nemo, but there's so many.
You've got them everywhere.
Yeah,
you've got.
Toy Story's full of them. Like all the supporting toys don't have huge impact.
Absolutely.
And Rex is like one of my favourite Pixar characters for sure.
Who does get a little shout out in the post credit bloopers as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like they do it all the time. You see it in Up. You see it in Moana.
Yeah.
And they're not even necessarily kind of. Some of them are just literally just animals, but they create. Yeah, they're just so good at creating characters with identities. And like you see it in Frozen, with the whole Big Summer Blowout guy.
Yeah.
It's
Whoop, Big Summer Blowout.
It's literally just kind of like they can throw a character in at will and just be like, yeah, here's another one you can enjoy. Here's another one.
Yeah, just making these small characters have such, forceful personalities that they're memorable.
Yeah.
I am very glad that the abominable snowman gets himself a job in the mailroom. And as you say, his job in the film, he's there to let them know that there is a village nearby. At which point, Sully obviously tells Mike, we have to go save Boo. And this is kind of Mike's moment. He is, I mentioned at the start, he is relentless optimist. He is supportive to the end, but this is the end. For him, you've stopped caring about me, you've stopped caring about, what about Celia, what about our lives? You're just ignoring all of that. I think he, to a degree, has a point.
Yeah, I really feel for him. When he says, like, what about Celia? I'm never going to see her again. What about me? Don't I matter?
Yeah. I mentioned the moment where Boo is scared as being one of the heartbreaking moments of the film, but this is another one. And Billy Crystal, like, we talked about the comedy, but here he is showing, like, he is a well-rounded actor. Like, he breaks your heart in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, the light and shade. And I think because up until this point, Mike is nothing but high energy, positive. Like, he got kidnapped and nearly abused with this scream machine. And, like, even then, his positivity did not falter.
Yeah.
And, I think it's powerful because the thing that really gets to him is the person that's closer to him than anyone else in the monster universe.
Yeah. Before we kind of move on, I do want to mention I love the fact that it's not just the abominable snowman, but they mention that Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster were also banished.
Yeah.
The idea that these kind of monsters that are, folk tales in our world are actual monsters that have been banished is a great one. So Sully barges back through into the monster world, smashing George while on his way.
Yeah.
Poor bloke. And he breaks through, rescues Boo, and starts getting beaten up by Randall until Mike shows up. I had no idea how Mike gets there so quick, but there he is. And finally kind of reveals Randall, who using his camouflage very well, but he reveals him with one of the snowballs he's brought, and we end up in this chase in this kind of hall of doors, which this is like kind of the one real set piece in the film, but it's really well done.
Yeah, this for me is the scene in the film that I remember most vividly.
Yeah,
you kind of,
as a kid, this is just epic.
Yeah, you get to actually explore their world a little bit more because up until this point, you're following a narrative, but you don't really know how they live. You don't really know the way that they see the world they live in, other than the fact that that they're terrified of children. You don't really get to explore their perception on the world that they live in, and so this is the first time I feel like you really get to see their experience of and how that crossover works. And I just love the idea that you can step through a door and you're somewhere completely different, and you could be on holiday.
The chase where they start going in and out of doors to get to Boo's is a really cool. So I mean, it kind of starts off just they're traveling on these kind of conveyors with the doors dangling, and then when they start using the doors, that's when it like goes to a whole another level for me.
Yeah.
And we travel to what looks like maybe Hawaii or the Caribbean. You've got Japan, you've got France. They're just going through everywhere. And then we've already talked about the kind of the final confrontation with Sully and Randall and Boo kind of stepping up and finding her courage and essentially saving Sully, and that Sully gets thrown into a trailer in like the deep south of America where they think he's a gator.
Randall.
Randall, sorry, yeah. have mixed up all these characters' names so many times. I did it take in my notes as well. The amount of times I wrote Mike or Sully in place of the other one.
Yeah. What I like about that is that, you know, you see, because we've just been watching these as monsters, and then suddenly there's something that has kind of compared Randall to something we're very familiar with. And like, and I guess you kind of see it in the way that Boo calls Sully Kitty as well, and like, there's like that kind of, I don't want to say anthropomorphized, but like the way that the perception of these monsters is kind of humanized in a very specific way. So like, Sully is kind of seen as this big cuddly kitty, and then by the end of it, Randall is seen as this sort of gator from deep south of the US, and like it. And I think being able to put it into so plainly into almost humanized terms.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. I like that. Yeah. And then they're brought back into the scare floor where Waternoose has all the CDA, but Mike, he runs away with a decoy, gets all the agents away, but kind of Waternoose realizes what's going on, and they end up running through. You think they've gone through Boo's door, but they're using the fake studio that we saw earlier. It's like those moments where you think, kind of, what was the point of showing us this guy failing at doing the scare at the start? It comes back. Like, everything is important in this film. I think it's a really tight screenplay because they give everything importance. Like, nothing's thrown in, just no scenes there just because.
I think Pixar does that so well.
Well, I think just very specifically, like, you gotta give a shout out to the screenwriters in this.
Yeah, for sure.
Andrew Stanton and Dan Gerson, they absolutely smashed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the line that he shouts about, "I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die."
Yeah.
And that kind of snuck up on me because I'd completely forgotten about it. And then as the scene, as it was coming up in the scene, I was like, "Oh my god!" And it was just like the absolute definition of nostalgia. Just getting like slapped by this line, and I could hear it before it was happening, like the intonation of it, and I could see it on the screen, and like, and for me, like, obviously it's kind of, it is this sort of, it all comes to a conclusion, and like, it just came flashing back at me in that scene.
Lovely. That's what the show's all about, man. The nostalgia.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he gets arrested by Roz, and she allows Boo to go back to her home, and we get this third heartbreaking scene of the film, is this goodbye.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not the goodbye. The goodbye's fine. It's when she goes.
Yeah. And he's not.
It's when she goes back to the closet. Yeah.
Oh my god, my heart broke. Yeah. And you know, it's like, it is just that kind of the lack of understanding. Like, she was how old? Maybe 2. And
like just learnt to speak. I think.
And she just didn't get what was going on, and it was that kind of innocence that broke your heart.
Yeah, for sure. It's, as I say, like 3 just big emotional wallops in this film, and this is the biggest of them.
Well, yeah, you say that, and then they put the cherry on top at the end, and you're an absolute state. I was blubbering. I was genuinely had tears streaming down my face.
Fair enough, yeah. When Mike reveals he's rebuilt the door, and the only part left is this one little chip he's given to Sully. And you don't... It actually is a really clever ending, because you don't get to see everything. You just see the shot of Sully, like his head coming through the door, and her saying
and
Kitty.
His face lights up, and you just, like...
Yeah.
It was done perfectly. Like, there was no better way to do it. And, like, it is exactly what we've been talking about the whole way through, about things being kept from you in order to build a certain impression. and you
Yeah.
get that in plots. So in Jurassic Park, for example, they don't show you the T-Rex for a reason. In other parts of this film, you don't get to see what Randall is doing because they want to misdirect you. But with this, it's just one moment, and it sums up how that kind of holding something back from the audience can be so brilliant in cinema, because
Yeah.
I think it would have been a completely different moment if you'd seen Boo, but the fact that they chose to do it like that just kind of tugs at the heartstrings so hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's Monsters Inc.
Yeah.
Before we go into our thoughts on the film, I'll wrap up with a very quick bit of
Yeah.
post-production. It was highly successful on its release, debuted #1. It was the third highest grossing film of the year, behind the first Harry Potter and the first Lord of the Rings. It surpassed Aladdin as the second highest grossing film of all time, animated film of all time, and was only behind The Lion King at that point. Strong critical reception. And it was up for a bunch of Oscars. Randy Newman won an Oscar for his closing credits song, If I Didn't Have You. It was also nominated in the first ever Best Animated Film category. It lost to our first ever film, Shrek. It was also nominated for Best Original Score, but it lost to Howard Shore's masterpiece of a score from The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And it lost Best Sound Editing to Pearl Harbor, which, like war films, always smash sound editing kind of categories. So I'm not surprised at that. There was a couple of lawsuits, one from a children's songwriter called Laurie Madrid, who claimed that the idea was stolen from her poem There's a Boy in My Closet, but a judge ruled that the film had nothing in common with the poem. The second was by an artist called Stanley Mouse, who claimed that the characters of Sully and Mike were kind of based on some drawings that he'd tried to sell in Hollywood. Whilst Disney said this definitively wasn't the case, they did actually settle this out of court. Obviously, in 2013, there was a prequel, Monsters University. Have you seen Monsters University?
I have.
What are your thoughts on it?
I did enjoy it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
Like, it's solid.
but I don't think it was ever going to beat Monsters Inc.
No, I think it's definitely a lower tier Pixar, which I still think it's like a 7 out of 10 film or whatever. It's perfectly fine.
That's good for you.
There's also an upcoming Disney Plus show called Monsters at Work coming out later this year, and it will be kind of both a spin-off and a sequel, and it will feature a number of the voice actors coming back.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Disney Plus are coming out with some big stuff.
I can't remember when it was, I think it was either slightly earlier this year or toward the end of last year. They just had a day where there was about 5 hours of announcements of everything that they've got coming, and Twitter was going mad.
Yeah. I mean, they've definitely stepped it up, for a platform that is obviously Disney have got so much money, but for a platform that is that new to kind of make such a big splash in the pool when you've got the likes of Amazon Prime and Netflix, to kind of step straight in and be such a big player.
New content is king, and they've got the IP to make new content in that will definitely drag people in.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that's kind of it on Monsters Inc. My final thoughts on the film. Obviously this is a big wave of nostalgia. I saw this film in cinemas as a kid. I do love it. I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle of Pixar's film list. I don't think it's one of their best, but it's still excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I loved it, obviously, but I kind of remembered how much I loved it when I watched it back. And, I did laugh, and I definitely did cry. And I got hit with that real wave of nostalgia watching it. So it was just kind of like really nice to revisit it. And, I have these films on my shelf, and to kind of get a chance to go back and actually take time to watch them, because these films, they'll sit there for ages and I'll just never watch them because I'm too busy or I've got so many other films to watch. But to kind of take time to sort of go back to watching a film that I loved so much as a kid, and really experienced that nostalgia was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I'm loving about doing the podcast is there are so many films that like you wouldn't necessarily pick to go and rewatch just on an afternoon or whatever. And doing it for the podcast, you remember how much you loved this film as a kid or whatever.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that means that for the next episode it is your pick. So fire away.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned last time I'm basing a lot of this season around kind of some favourite characters. And we haven't done any superhero films yet, have we?
I don't think so. Not kind of classic superheroes, not your conventional superheroes.
Okay. Well, I obviously a lot of my favourite characters are superheroes. I have a Green Lantern tattoo. We're not doing that film.
Oh, okay,
ever.
I was going to say, please no.
Obviously I love characters like Superman. But my all-time favourite superhero character, technically, let's go comic book character.
Okay.
Because it's Hellboy.
Okay, I've actually just acquired that DVD. So
Well,
good timing.
well, we're not actually doing Hellboy.
Oh, we're not.
We're doing Hellboy 2: The Golden Army.
Okay, I think I acquired both.
Okay, that's good.
So I'm covered. All right, great.
I always stubbornly believed Hellboy was the superior film, and I recently changed my mind. I love Hellboy 2, so that's the one I decided to go with.
It is. Looking forward to it. I think I've only seen the first one, actually.
The second one's awesome.
Would it make sense to watch the first one, then the second one?
If you really want, the first one's quite long, if I remember. I think
I'll
you can
watch the second one.
I don't think you need to. You just need to kind of get the basics of their relationship, which is fine. And as a closer, so I mentioned last week that I thought Raiders of the Lost Ark might have the best opening scene of all time.
Yeah.
And we put that question out on social media, and we got quite a lot of people came back.
We did, actually.
So we got a couple of people who agreed with the suggestion you put out last time, which was Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Which, obviously, yeah, it's iconic. There was a few that had a couple of people suggest a couple of Pixar. Up kind of that whole film is solid, but the opening 10 minutes is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it almost does the job of a whole film within about 10 minutes, doesn't it?
Yeah, Toy Story 2, which is one of my personal favourites, the Star Wars parody with Evil Emperor Zurg. Oh no, it's not the Star Wars parody, but it introduces Zurg.
Yeah.
Inglourious Bastards, it's one of the tensest, most brilliant scenes.
I mean, I've got to say that Christoph Waltz is one of my favourite actors when he's when he's kind of in his prime, and that scene was just incredible.
Yeah. Scream, which is probably for me the best horror opening of all time. I know Drew Barrymore was kind of like publicised as being like the lead in this film, and she gets killed off in that opening scene. Spoilers for Scream. It's iconic, the whole what's your favourite scary movie and all of that.
I don't think I've actually seen it.
It's phenomenal. Yeah. So those are the ones that got like a couple of suggestions, and I'm just gonna run through a load of the others.
Okay.
Because we got a lot. Wall-E, the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, which is where Gandalf fights the Balrog. Any of kind of the Star Wars films where there's like the opening crawl that then pans to something in space. Mm-hmm. Someone suggested both Legally Blonde and Clueless, which are both kind of very similar with someone getting ready to a pop song.
Yeah. I've actually just recently watched Legally Blonde. It's my girlfriend's
the worst one of the
film,
two to watch.
So
get her on Clueless instead.
I think I have Clueless as well. I think I've just acquired Clueless as well somehow.
Oh, it's great. It's great. The Matrix is in there. The Dark Knight with the heist on the bank with the Joker.
Yeah.
The opening scene of Jaws, where a kid gets attacked. Watchmen, which is kind of more the opening titles, but they're really good. Blade,
in the nightclub,
the blood rave in Blade. That one's definitely up there. Blade Runner, Magnificent Seven, Pulp Fiction, Departed, Princess Mononoke all got thrown in there.
Pulp Fiction's pretty classic. I mean,
it happens like 3 times in the film.
Ever.
It is both my parents' favourite film ever.
That's almost certainly going to pop up.
Yeah. And then there's a couple I haven't seen. So there is a 1946 film noir Ernest Hemingway adaptation called The Killers, which someone suggested.
Okay.
A film called Born Invincible, which is a Taiwanese kung fu film. And finally, have to shout out to my mate Ben, who I'd love to get on the podcast, who picked... He's a great lover of like extreme Asian cinema, and he picked a Takashi Miike film called Dead or Alive. And I watched the opening of that film, and it is just an insane sort of crime film. It's nuts. It did get me excited to see the film, and I bought the trilogy on DVD.
Okay.
So it did its job.
Nice.
So there's a whole host of best movie openings ever.
I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, Saving Private Ryan is kind of my immediate go-to for sort of classic film openings. Absolutely, no, it's so hard-hitting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a great suggestions there for sure.
I think my top 5 would be, along with sort of Raiders and Private Ryan, I think Inglourious Bastards, Scream and Blade are the ones that I think just really do it for me.
I think I need to see Scream then for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I love the film. It's one of my all-time favourite horrors, but the opening sequence is masterful.
Yeah. Well, I think season 3 will cover Halloween, so...
Yeah, that's the plan. Look, you've just spoiled my Halloween pick, alright?
Oh, no, sorry.
It's alright, you'll probably forget by October.
Yeah, probably. Be too busy trying to figure out mine.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that's it. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Google Podcast, Podbean, YouTube, and we have Spotify working. I can confirm.
You can find us on Spotify now.
Yeah, you can follow us at Nostalgia Bubble on Twitter and at Nostalgia Bubble Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me at Shuggy Says anywhere on the internet, and at Shuggy Plays on Twitch. I've started doing some streaming there. Come check us out. It's a fun time.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Nyrees, Nyerees, or on Instagram at ReeseNye.
And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.